Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles. It's a delight that we are here today from Los Angeles to London. Garry Crystal, who is a New Filmmakers alumni with his third film with us, Down. But for those that haven't seen it, let's take a look at a clip.
I'm so sorry.
Shit.
Garry, it's nice to be reunited again.
It's emotional.
It is emotional.
It's very emotional.
Yeah, no, really amazing. And I just want to say thank you for bringing again another fantastic film. This one though, I have to say, you really took me to a new level of a Garry Crystal film. It was intense to watch. But tell us, for those that haven't seen it, tell us a synopsis of your film.
Sure. So Down is a dark comedy about two strangers trapped in an elevator. I was going to say lift, but you guys say elevator. So two strangers trapped in an elevator together. One is dying because he's attempted suicide. The other is dying to escape because she has obsessive compulsive disorder.
I mean, from the first moment to the very last moment, it's an intense watch, and brilliantly done by your actors, which we'll come into in a second. But usually I ask this question, Garry, and I don't always expect the response with a film like yours, but dare I ask it, where did the inspiration come from in creating your project?
So it's based on a true story, something that I experienced when I was directing a play when I was a student at Birmingham University in the UK, and you had the auditorium at the bottom of the building, and you had the bar at the top. And after the first half, the audience all left the auditorium to go upstairs to the bar, and I was left in the auditorium. And I walked over to where the cast were in the dressing rooms. When I went past the elevator at the bottom, there's a banging noise. I turned, the doors opened. And it was a scene like The Shining, and there was this poor guy there who had slashed his wrists, and I had to help him out. And thankfully, he lived. I didn't know what happened to him, and I don't know what led him to do what he did. Didn't really talk much to me. He just kept on apologizing, and that was it. So I thought, when you write things, that some people suggest that you do it from an experience that you've had, and you obviously kind of subvert it in some way. So that's what I did. And I did a lot of research, because when you're talking about things like suicide, you can't just you just can't write about it. You have to do research. You have to be respectful to an incredibly sensitive subject matter that affects sadly a huge amount of people. And I worked very closely with two charities in the UK, OCD Action and also Mind, but also an amazing it's not a charity, it's a website set by this incredible person called Desiree, and it's called Live Through This. And I'd really recommend anyone that's experienced anything or has experienced anything or knows someone, they should look at it. It's the testimonies of people who have attempted suicide and are alive. It's a very frank portrayal of their experiences, but that was an incredible source, and she looked over the script with me and made sure that what I was doing was realistic, was respectful, and because you've got a big responsibility when you make anything that deals with suicide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was it? I mean, listen, to go for an experience like that is, not very few will go for an experience like what you went experiencing that with the other person. And I really love that you went the extra mile to make this film and say, no, I'm going to do this with the right people, with skilled people that can support me and how we make this, and really bring awareness to it as well. Was that kind of something that you knew from the very beginning? Like, because obviously this was a true story, but was it something you knew from the beginning that I want to get other charitable organizations, other skilled people involved, or was there things you found out along the way of the journey of making the film?
No, I felt I had to. I can't. Oh God, I can't remember what it was. I remember seeing someone who made a film where they had. Oh, you know what it was? actually this didn't influence it, but this kind of made me realize that I'd done the right thing. Someone made a film, I think it ended up getting shortlisted for an Oscar, about Jamie Bolger. And I don't know if you remember, and that was very controversial because they never consulted the family of Jamie Bolger, and it was all about the two boys that had committed the crime. And I think something like you need to ask for respect for it. And when I was at university, I did a dissertation on another cheery subject called the Holocaust presented in film and TV. And there are two strands of thoughts when it comes to presenting the Holocaust in film and TV. There's the kind of, you can only do it if you've experienced it. And so therefore there are people like Claude Lanzmann, who made this 9-hour documentary called Shoah, and he had, he'd experienced the Holocaust. But there's also someone like Spielberg, who obviously was born after the Holocaust, and he was like the populist, but he treated it with respect. He spoke to people, survivors of the Holocaust. And I think whether you've experienced it yourself or if you're an outsider from it, you have to be involved with the subject matter. It's not something you can just kind of, it's too profound a subject just to kind of take a guess at what people are thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, watching the film, I couldn't help but think of you, Garry, and think of your whole production team and thinking, firstly, I love that you made this whole scene inside an elevator. I thought that was just brilliant. It's always great when you can make a really good story in one space, essentially. But then concern was like, oh my goodness, how on earth do you make a film that involves, a lot of makeup and effects and blood and get it right? Like, was that nerve-wracking for you? What was that whole process like? Because I was thinking, oh my goodness, what an undertaking.
Well, you've always got a plan, I think, when you're making it. It's not the type of thing that you could improvise on the day. And look, we're very lucky. I had the most incredible team. So the cast, obviously, Amanda Donohoe was just, she was up for it. I mean, this is an incredibly established actress, and she was up for getting down and dirty, literally. Amazing team. Great production designer who designed the lift, which is a neighbor called Jordana Finkel, who'd worked on like Force Awakens and Harry Potter, and she was happy to work on. I know, crazy. She's amazing. So build a set we could take we had to work quickly, so we had to build a lift that kind of the walls came off, we could remove the top and really turn things over incredibly quickly. We had problems actually with the construction of it, but we were pleased with how it ended up in the day. An amazing DOP with Gareth Munden, who I've done all my short films with, and the producer Karen Newman. We just had a great team of people who were really up for doing it, and yeah, it worked well, like a well-oiled vehicle. But obviously there were struggles along the way.
Let's talk about your cast. I mean, goodness me, a two-hander right here. I mean, the moment Amanda came in the first shot, I'm transfixed by her. She's incredible. She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's amazing to watch. I could watch every single movement she makes. Is so interesting. Like, how do you? Again, it's a very, it's challenging roles, but a great acting roles to take on for both characters. Cast. How did you bring those two together, and how did you kind of work with them as a director?
Well, I was very, very lucky. I sent the script to her. I've been very fortunate in my films. I've managed to have a very high profile cast. So in my other films, I had Bertie, which you guys showed. I had Alison Steadman, who's like an iconic UK legend, and Arthur Darvill and Jemima Rogan. I sent this to Amanda Donohoe, and she said, yeah, look, she was well up for it. And James Eales, I saw him in Peaky Blinders, and he's only in 2 episodes of it, but he's incredibly memorable. He's got this incredible face, and he's very expressive. I just knew I had to have him, so I did. I tend to, I used to be an actor, and you don't really get to rehearse on TV shows anyway. You might be able to go to a read through, but then that's it. You're on set and you just have a run through and then you shoot. But we had a meeting, we had a read through, and I kind of made sure that because it's quite dialogue heavy, so I made sure there were plenty of takes that we could get the emotions right, and we had to try and shoot it as chronologically as you can do, bearing in mind the subject matter and everything. So we tried that as best as we could, but sometimes you just can't shoot chronologically.
Yeah, it was really great. I mean, with both of them though, like, I mean, you're in this kind of small space as well. Like, was that a real elevator? How are you shooting? Like, it's quite intense when it's a small space like that.
So it was all built. So as I said before, we could literally remove every single wall. We had a corridor that we had outside it. I wanted to do more. I wanted to shoot a lot from above, but we just didn't have enough time. And I tend to plan things a lot in advance. For this, as I said, something you just can't improvise. So I storyboarded the whole thing with my very kind of crap artistic skills, and then we just had an idea. But obviously, you have to adapt it as you go along. So the more intense the moment goes in, the more you kind of move in. You just have to plan it, basically.
I mean, I think, I mean, again, the subject is, you've got some really comedic kind of dark humored moments in it, and it's brilliant, and they work so well off of each other. But again, at the same time, it's a very, very serious, intense, life-threatening moment as well. I'm just kind of curious, what has kind of the reaction been from audiences? Because there's just so much detail. It's got dark comedy elements, but yes, it's also about, mental health too. So how has it been for you?
So, okay, so there's two answers to that. So yes, it is very, very intense. But as you guys know, my films, I tend to go for dark comedy. And I think when you've got incredibly serious subject matters, the best way of getting people to engage with them is to loosen them up, and that's why I use comedy. I think if you make a film that's incredibly intense, some people just can't engage with it. You know what I mean? And it's quite nice to kind of balance the two. This is where I get really pretentious, but it's a Shakespearean technique, right? In Macbeth, he does it. There's the whole bit with the porter, not, and it's a very, very funny moment, and then you come for the big, massive sucker blow after that. So, and the second answer to that is I was very lucky that this was made before lockdown, and it's had a very long festival run. It's still showing in festivals, but I was able to have the experience of seeing it with live audiences. It's great. Just see the audience reacting with it, and it's the bit when with the blood, everyone kind of screams, and with the vomit. But also you can hear a pin drop when she reveals, the various things in her life that made her the way she is. It's really nice to hear these completely conflicting responses when you watch it. So yeah, I love watching it with other people.
I mean, I think there's also, it's so funny. I like that there were just, everyday, human beings that just happen to share this moment together. And also just kind of, I mean, British people are hilarious. Like, they're so funny how we react to things. Like, that probably wasn't very dissimilar to how I would react in that situation if I was her. Like, we're all kind of awkward anyway. And that's the funny thing, that British people are the most awkward people, and we apologize even for committing suicide. Like, that's the other funny.
Yeah.
I mean, we are a funny bunch, aren't we, Gary? I mean, I think that was part of that the humor was as well.
Yeah, we are, but it's funny, isn't it, when you talk about the kind of awkwardness of British humor? And I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I think I don't know what because America is such a massive place. It's got many different identities because it's so massive. So there must be, I don't know where, well, no, Canada's not part, but they say sorry the whole time, right? But there's got to be like an American, surely there's some state somewhere where people apologize the whole time. It's definitely not New York, right? But it's,
No, I think it really fits in well with him. But I like that it almost could be, it could have been anyone, it could have been one of us. It was very interesting because I almost felt like I was, with Amanda's character, I always felt like I was almost, her experiencing this. It was almost, it felt like, what would I do in this given situation as well? No, I think the wonderful thing as well is, I think the great morality in the fact that you had these two charities involved as well is that, we don't often know what one is going through,
No.
I mean, catch that guy 30 seconds before, he may not have done that, or his world might have changed. Was that kind of something that, especially during these times where I think mental health is on the rise, you sort of...
Yeah. I'm sorry, Daddy, I didn't hear the last bit of what you said, mate.
I was going to say, was it something that, obviously working with these two charities, was it something that, obviously mental health has kind of been on the rise a little bit as well? Like, was it kind of something that you wanted to sort of allude, like, hey, this is happening, and we've got to do better, and it's good to know about and learn about? Was that something in your conscious before?
Well, I think ever since that, in the screening last night, and one of the audience asked me, was it like therapy for me? And and it wasn't therapy for me making the film, because weirdly I was fine. I mean, yeah, I was shaken up when it happened, but I wasn't, you know, shaken and needed therapy. You know, I was cool. But obviously I've thought about it, and unfortunately I do know a couple of people who have taken their own lives, and it's a real, same in the States, it's a very big big killer of young men, and so I think tying that in was important. It's you know, it's one of life's taboos. People still don't talk about it that much, you know, and it's something that does need to be talked about. And one of my best, one of the things I'm most proud about with the film was so Desiree, who really loved the film, and because obviously she is someone that she's a suicide survivor is the wrong word, but she's someone that's attempted suicide, and so she really resonated with her, and it was shown at Flicker's Rhode Island, and there was a professor in psychology who came to see it from the local university, and he wrote us a note saying how he was going to use it to help, you know, with people. So I'm pleased that it does definitely seem to be ticking. It does provoke conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, if we're still talking about your film, how great is that? That's job well done, you know, and if it can help anyone, then fantastic, and that's great. So yeah, good news.
Yeah.
Well, Garry, you know, this is to say Gary's third film with us, but he's a man of many things and many projects. So I know it's a very interesting time right now, but are you writing any more short films? Is there anything else like you're kind of in the process? I know there's things you can't talk about, but is there anything that you can share with us?
No, I can't. It's really it's a funny one. I'm not going to make any more short films because they take a lot of time. No, because I love doing them, but they take a lot of time to make, and that amount of time, it's okay. It's a fraction of what it does to make a feature, but I'm ready now to make a feature. So the idea was to make a feature version of Down. So I started writing that.
Okay.
Sorry, say again.
Great.
Yeah, no, it will be cool. But then I had an opportunity to option a book of something else, a subject matter that is very close to home, actually, like almost kind of runs along a parallel with my family's history, and I worked in that for quite a while, and then lockdown happened, which meant that the production went like that. So I'm very, very lucky that I'm a lot of my work is as a freelance documentary editor. So I've worked constantly throughout lockdown editing, but I've been doing lots of writing as well. So I've been finishing off the screenplay for Down, but I'm also working on something else, a pilot for a series, which I'm hopefully finishing end of next week. But I'm been doing all this, juggling everything. So hopefully once lockdown is lifted here in the UK, and you know, for everyone, production can start up, then I'll be able to start getting out there and shooting.
No, well, you know, listen, anyone that is, and for anyone that doesn't know this, if you're a documentary editor, like you have the patience of like, your patience level is beyond most human beings. So, and you've done
It depends who you're working with. It depends who you're working with, Dan.
yeah, I guess so, right? But no, you've done some amazing work throughout your career thus far. And listen, if ever those, I love when your films come up and come to us because I just love the world you take us in. So I'm really excited that you're going to be doing a feature of Down, and best wishes with, you know, making the screenplay for that, because I really think it's a brilliant story, and I kind of wanted to be lived in the world longer as well. I really did. So well, listen, Garrett, I know we kind of always finish on, but you know, again, every single project kind of leads you to alluding to new things. This was a particular project that could have had many facets that could have gone wrong, or maybe you've learned from. Is there anything that you maybe learned from this project, or you could share with our filmmaking audience that you kind of try and go by in your career?
You've never got enough time. that's the reality of it. And if you can get more time, then do it. That's what I would say. I mean, it's funny actually. In lockdown, what I've learned is, I'm trying not to go off on too much of a filibuster, but in lockdown, I've really, because I've been writing longer form stuff, I've learned a lot more about the writing process.
Mm-hmm.
And my real thing the thing that I would pass on to my fellow filmmakers or writers, the one thing I've discovered and love and listen to is script notes. with Craig Mazin and John August. I don't know if you've listened to any of this.
I have. Yeah.
I think they're amazing. I mean, look, Big Fish, I love, and Chernobyl was amazing, and I just think they're both great, and they're so articulate in what they say. And I think it's interesting. It's like when you're preparing to do a shoot, you need to do your homework, right? You've got to say, right, these are the shots that I want, and I think it's the same for when you're writing. Got to do your homework. You can't just jump in and start writing. Well, some people can, but I personally can't. I think you need to really do your research, know your characters, know your subject matter. That's the thing. And to be honest, that's what I did with Down. Actually, I had to really do my homework for when we were filming, so we could work quickly and remove walls, and also just so I knew the characters really well as well.
Yes,
so, yeah.
Amazing. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a really good, amazing example. So, well, Garry, we miss you. Sorry we can't do it physically this time.
Likewise.
Back.
Yeah.
And best wishes with the next projects, and thanks again.
Cheers, Danny.
Your film to us. Really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me a part of it, and I love you guys, and you're so supportive of the whole, new filmmakers community, and I'm indebted to you guys. So look after yourselves.
Thank you, Garry. Appreciate it.